It was just supposed to be a quiet night, the kind that ended with a cup of chamomile tea and a good detective novel. Life hadn't been giving me much excitement lately, so I'd taken to reading about fictional cases to satisfy my thirst for adventure. But on this particular evening, everything was about to change. I had just settled into bed when the shrill sound of my doorbell broke through the silence. It wasn't the polite kind of ring you might expect from a normal visitor. No, this was a harsh, relentless buzz that yanked me out of a peaceful sleep. My head still groggy, I glanced at the clock. 2:07 a.m. Who on earth would be at my door this late? I stumbled out of bed, rubbing my eyes, and made my way to the front door. As I peered through the peephole, the sight that greeted me was not one I had anticipated. A woman stood on my doorstep, illuminated by the yellowish glow of my porch light. Her hair was a garish shade of blonde, piled high in a messy bun, and she wore a brightly colored floral dress that seemed to shout retirement party more than casual evening wear. Her face was less than friendly, to say the least. This was Carol Matthews, the president of our local neighborhood association, someone who believed she ruled the block with an iron fist. I considered pretending I wasn't home, but Carol was the type of person who would knock until the door fell off its hinges. With a heavy sigh, I opened it just a crack, the safety chain still in place. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" I asked, trying to mask the annoyance in my voice. She squinted through her oversized, rhinestone-studded glasses and hissed, "Don't get snarky with me, Mark. I need access to your pool. Right now." I blinked, processing her words. "At 2 in the morning?" I muttered, still half in disbelief. "It's freezing out here, and the pool's closed for the season. Plus, only residents can use it." Her chest puffed out as though she were some grand authority figure. "I'm the head of the HOA. I make the rules, and I'm having an emergency." "An emergency?" I echoed, utterly confused. "What kind of emergency requires a late-night swim? Did you lose your dentures in the salad again?" Her face turned a shade of purple that could have been mistaken for a bad bruise. "How dare you? I'm a vital member of this community, and I will get my swim, one way or another." Before I could make a snarky reply, she rummaged through her oversized handbag, the kind that could probably house a small pet, and pulled out a large canister. It wasn't hairspray or mace. No, it was something far worse. A huge industrial-sized can of pepper spray. "Are you serious?" I gasped, stepping back in alarm. "What are you doing with that?" "Getting my swim," she screamed, unleashing a cloud of orange mist directly into my face. The pain was immediate. My eyes burned, my nose stung, and I couldn't breathe. I stumbled backward, choking and gagging, blindly fumbling for the door handle. Carol, meanwhile, continued to shriek and tug at the gate to my pool, desperate to get through. I managed to slam the door shut and lock it, then collapsed onto the floor, coughing violently. The burning sensation in my eyes felt like I was rubbing them with sandpaper. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to crawl to the kitchen and wash my face with cold water. Still reeling from the assault, I made the only logical decision, calling the police. Through tears and coughing, I explained to the dispatcher that I had been attacked by the neighborhood HOA president, who was trying to break into my pool for a midnight swim. The dispatcher didn't sound at all surprised, as if these kinds of calls were a regular occurrence in our neighborhood. Moments later, the sound of sirens grew louder, and 2 patrol cars screeched to a halt outside my house. Officers Bennett and Harris, one seasoned and one fresh-faced rookie, approached cautiously. I quickly filled them in on the details, pointing to the lingering pepper spray residue on my porch. "She pepper sprayed you? For a swim?" Officer Harris asked, his eyebrows lifting in disbelief. "That's the gist of it," I confirmed, still blinking away the sting in my eyes. Officer Bennett sighed, clearly familiar with Carol's antics. "We've had run-ins with her before. She's passionate about her HOA duties." "Passionate?" I scoffed. "She's nuts. She's dangerous and needs to be stopped." Officer Bennett nodded grimly. "We'll handle it from here. You stay inside and try to recover." I watched from the window as the officers made their way to my pool gate, where Carol was still trying to break through, using a pair of garden shears. The confrontation was brief. Carol, clearly unhinged, swung the shears at Officer Harris, narrowly missing his head. That was all it took. Within seconds, they had her on the ground and in cuffs. With Carol safely in the back of the police car, Officer Bennett came over to speak with me. "We're taking her to the station for processing. Do you want to press charges?" "Press charges? Are you kidding?" I exclaimed, still angry and shaking. "She attacked me with pepper spray and tried to break into my property. I want her behind bars." Officer Bennett nodded. "We'll take care of it. In the meantime, we need to secure her house. Standard procedure." "Why?" I asked, suddenly feeling uneasy. "Just in case," he replied cryptically. "Sometimes people act out for other reasons." A few moments later, a second squad car pulled up, followed by a van from Animal Control. My unease grew. What was going on? Hours passed, and just as the sun began to rise, I was about to finally rest when Officer Bennett knocked on my door again. Officer Harris looked drained, as if he hadn't had a proper rest in days. "Mark," he said, his voice unusually somber, "we need to talk." He went on to explain that they had thoroughly searched Carol Matthews' house, and what they found inside was, to put it mildly, disturbing. The place wasn't just cluttered or disorganized. It was an absolute nightmare. It was a hoarder's paradise, but not the kind you'd expect to see on TV. Newspapers were stacked so high they nearly touched the ceiling. Old yogurt cups were strewn across every surface. And then there were the porcelain dolls, hundreds of them, each one with glassy eyes that seemed to stare right through you. But that wasn't even the worst part. In the basement, they discovered a hidden room. Inside, Carol had carefully organized and labeled every HOA document from the last 2 decades. It was like she had been keeping meticulous records, annotating everything in her path. And there, covering an entire wall, was a giant corkboard filled with photos of neighborhood residents, each one connected by an elaborate web of red string. It looked like the work of a conspiracy theorist who'd lost touch with reality. And smack in the middle of it all was my photo. "What does this mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Officer Harris let out a long sigh, his face growing darker. "It seems like Carol was obsessed with the HOA. She wasn't just running the association. She was tracking everyone, gathering every piece of personal information she could find. We found financial records, private letters, even medical files. She thought she was protecting the neighborhood from threats." "Threats?" I repeated, completely lost. "Like, people who just want to use their pools in peace." Officer Harris let out a dry chuckle. "Something like that." He paused before continuing. "We also found evidence that she'd been diverting HOA funds for herself. Nothing huge, but over 20 years, it really adds up." The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The strange finds, the bizarre rules, the constant interference with everyone's lives. Carol wasn't just an eccentric HOA president. She was a power-hungry control freak who had turned the whole association into her personal empire. And the Animal Control? I asked, my curiosity piqued. "What do they have to do with this?" "Well, it turns out Carol had a pretty serious cat hoarding problem. Over 50 of them," Officer Harris said with a grimace. "We had to clear them out. The place was crawling with them." I stared out the window as Animal Control officers loaded cage after cage of mewing cats into their van. 50 cats. It felt like a punchline to a bad joke, but the horror of it was real. And it was all tied to Carol. Life as I knew it had just been flipped upside down by a woman who thought she could run the neighborhood like a monarch. Someone obsessed with porcelain dolls, pepper spray, and hiding behind the guise of protecting the community. The aftermath of Carol's arrest was just as chaotic as I'd feared. News vans parked outside our suburban streets like a plague of locusts. The HOA was thrown into disarray, and residents fought over who should take over Carol's position. As for me, I was suddenly a local celebrity, known as the guy who had been pepper sprayed by the neighborhood association president. The legal circus that followed was almost as absurd as the entire ordeal. Carol, predictably, pleaded not guilty to everything, and her lawyer, a fast-talking guy named Brad Steele, yes, really, argued that she was just a well-meaning advocate who'd taken her role a little too seriously. The trial was an absolute spectacle. Brad Steele tried to paint me as a bitter resident with a vendetta against Carol, even going so far as to point to my detective novel collection as proof that I had violent tendencies. He even tried to claim that I had threatened Carol with a garden hose, attempting to justify her pepper spraying attack on me as self-defense. But the evidence was overwhelming. The pepper spray, the garden shears, the locked basement room, the 50 cats, the embezzled HOA funds. It all came together to paint a clear picture of a woman who had lost all sense of reality. In the end, the jury found Carol guilty on all charges: assault, attempted burglary, embezzlement, stalking, and animal cruelty. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes, sentenced her to 10 years in prison, followed by mandatory psychiatric treatment. She was also required to pay restitution to the HOA, attend anger management classes, and, in a fitting twist, volunteer at an animal shelter, cleaning up after cats for at least 20 hours a week once she was released. The reign of terror that had been Carol Matthews' rule over the HOA was finally over. The association was dissolved and replaced by a more democratic system. People who actually cared about the neighborhood, not just controlling it, took charge. The porcelain dolls? They were sold at an estate sale that turned into a bizarre spectacle. I even bought one, a particularly eerie one with glass eyes that seemed to follow me around the room. I named it Carol, as a reminder of the madness I'd survived. As for me, I became something of a local hero. People would stop me in the street, thank me for standing up to Carol. I even got a free car wash out of it. The pepper spray incident eventually became a funny story to tell at parties. The sting of orange in my eyes faded, as did the strange, lingering smell on my porch. But the experience changed me. It made me more involved in my community. I ran for a spot as neighborhood rep and even volunteered at the local animal shelter, where I learned to tolerate cats, though I still wasn't a huge fan. Carol Matthews' story became a local legend, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of questioning authority, even when it comes in the form of a sweet little old lady obsessed with floral dresses and pepper spray. And now, every time I hear a doorbell ring in the middle of the night, a small shiver runs down my spine. But then I remember, Carol is behind bars. The cats have found loving homes. And I can smile, knowing that even in the strangest of situations, justice was served.